Let's get it. 580 Sports Talk coming at you on a Wednesday. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the program today, whether you're listening on 580 WIBW, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com, or if you're checking out the YouTube stream, youtube.com/@sportson580. However you're consuming today's program, sure glad you're doing so. Welcome in to 580 Sports Talk. I am Dan Lucero. Once again, I am hosting solo today with Brendan Dworzinski continuing his vacation. He sent all of us here on the 580 Sports team a nice little missive, him drinking a lemonade on the beach today. Very rude, very thoughtless of him. So Brendan's having a good time out there on the Eastern Seaboard, and he will be back on Monday, as I have mentioned. So it's me hosting, Kyle Manthe across the glass is our producer, and we've got 3 hours of fun coming your way today here on 580 Sports Talk. Lots to get to, lots happening right now. The Florida State Board of Trustees is essentially saying, if we don't get a better deal from the ACC post-haste, we're going to leave the ACC. So we're in the process of blowing up another conference presently. Florida State's got a gun pointed to the ACC's head, and that's happening now, like right now, live at a Board of Trustees meeting. So that might be, if you're sports inclined, college sports inclined, that might be a big chunk of what your Twitter timeline is talking about right now. So there's all of that. Oh, yeah, and the report that the Big Ten has begun talking expansion with what might be left of the Pac-12, assuming that some of those schools left in the Pac-12 are going to join the Big 12. There are a lot of moving parts right now. Nothing official, but enough being reported and enough actually being said out loud, again, at a Board of Trustees meeting right now in Tallahassee, that we can assume that there will be some more shifting of the tectonic plates in college athletics. We'll try our best to keep up with that as the show goes on today. We're going to talk some Royals baseball because, folks, they're on a winning streak, and there is no funnier way to win a baseball game than how the Royals won last night. The old walk-off balk. Who doesn't love that, especially when it happens with a relief pitcher who has yet to throw a pitch in the game, who comes in and immediately balks, allowing the winning run to score. That is funny. It is a relief to know that although the New York Mets are less talented and less expensive than they were at this time last week, after they sold off Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer and others, they are no less hilarious. They are no less Metsy than they were before. So we'll talk about that, some of the good stuff from last night, sort of tie a bow on the trade deadline. Obviously, that was wrapping up as we were wrapping up yesterday. The Royals snuck those two trades for Scott Barlow and Ryan Yarbrough in under the wire. The reviews are in from around baseball media, and we'll tie up any loose ends from the trade deadline, talk about last night's win as we talk some Royals baseball. We'll play some Chiefs audio from training camp earlier today. And we've got two great guests coming your way in today's program. Of course, Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com will join us for the Azura Credit Union Wildcat wrap-up. He joins us at 4:35 this afternoon. We will speak to Fitz about the changes afoot in the Big 12, the changes that may yet be coming to the league. And an announcement today, K-State Hoops is going overseas. They're going to Israel and Abu Dhabi. Yeah, that was just announced within the last half hour or so. So we'll get Fitz's thoughts and some details on what that means for Kansas State basketball and some thoughts as fall camp prepares to get underway for the Wildcats as well. Plenty of K-State athletics to talk about with Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com. That's at 4:35. Then at 5:25, day 3 of our training camp reports with the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azura Credit Union. Today we'll hear from Travis Kelce. And Mitch says he's got some Travis Kelce facts and figures that are going to blow your mind. And that is not a promise that Mitch Holthus makes lightly. So we'll hear from Mitch again about 5:25 on today's show. Plus, all of the other segments that you've come to know and love from the program on a Wednesday. We'll play One Gotta Go here in a little bit. We'll have our What Is Wrong With You coming up about 4:25 or so. See if anybody can take down our first daily winner of the month of August, the Oblivious Boyfriend. We'll have some headlines at 5 o'clock, top of the 5 o'clock hour, including the dumbest sports betting scandal we will ever live through. The details continue to come out, and the people involved in this Iowa and Iowa State betting scandal are the dumbest kids in America and have some of the dumbest parents in America. And we will detail all of that. Hunter Decker's lighting his eligibility and playing career on fire. Lots of stuff to get to from that story that continues to develop, being reported out by the Des Moines Register. So we'll get some more on that, have some thoughts on that, and some other things in headlines today. You are, of course, invited and encouraged to be a part of the program today. You can hit us up on the text line, 785-272-9429, or if you are in the YouTube stream, we've got a live chat feature. You can comment on the program, and we see those, and we try to shout those out as well. Hello to those of you who are already in the chat or who may join the chat a little bit later on today. So, lots to get to, and we may as well start with what is happening literally right now with regards to Florida State University and the trustees having a meeting that is being tracked by everybody's college football source of choice. And I'm going to try and find some of the choice quotes as they fly across the timeline. Brian Fisher of Fox Sports has been covering this from the start. President of Florida State, Rick McCullough, speaking earlier, our goal would be to stay in the ACC, but staying in the ACC under the current situation is hard for us to figure out how we remain competitive unless there were a major change in the revenue distribution within the conference. McCullough would go on to say, I believe FSU will at some point have to very seriously consider leaving the ACC unless there is a radical change to the revenue distribution. In layman's terms, we need more money. If we don't get more money, we're going to look for a way out. Drew Weatherford is a Florida State trustee, and if that name sounds familiar to you, he's played quarterback at Florida State. Maybe you remember Drew Weatherford's playing career. It wasn't terribly distinguished, but yeah, he was a quarterback at Florida State. Now he's the trustee, and he goes even further than the president to say it's not a matter of if we leave, in my opinion, it's when we leave. So there you have it. You've got Florida State now saying that they need to leave, that they might have to leave, that they will leave the ACC at some point. You know, Florida State is not a school with a long history in the ACC. It's the only conference they've ever been a part of football-wise. They were an independent for a long time. In case you don't remember, the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of independent programs that were pretty big, pretty power programs that were independent. Miami was an independent for a long time before they joined the Big East. Florida State was an independent. Penn State was an independent before they joined the Big Ten. Being independent in football, there used to be like 20, 25 Division I schools that were independents, depending on how far back you go. I want to see if I can pull up real quick, if I can go back in the Wayback Machine. If I go back to, let's say, 1984. Let's go all the way back to 1984. Actually, you know what? Let's do 86 because I was born that year. So to give you a little bit of perspective. 1986 college football. The independents there were 24 teams that were independent in 1986. 24 teams in Division I football that were independent, including the national champion that year, Penn State, and the national runner-up that year, Miami. Virginia Tech and Boston College were independent. Florida State was independent. Pitt was independent. Notre Dame obviously remains independent. South Carolina was not in a conference. Syracuse and West Virginia were not in a football conference. Then you have a bunch of teams that would eventually join Conference USA and have kind of bounced around that periphery of major college football, like Tulsa, Southern Mississippi, Cincinnati, Memphis, schools like that. Wichita State was still playing football in 1986. They were an independent as well. Of course, that was the final year of football at Wichita State. But I say all that to say that Florida State doesn't go as far back with the ACC as, like, Duke does. Duke's a founding member. North Carolina's a founding member. Virginia joined at some point, but they might have been a founding member too. I'm trying to think. But like the North Carolina schools, those are founding ACC members. So there's not that much history that Florida State is pushing back on, but there's a lot of deserve in the speeches that Florida State is giving publicly now. A lot of the idea that this is something that they deserve. They deserve more revenue. They deserve a better TV deal. They deserve better than what they're getting from the ACC. And if I may quote one of the great TV characters of all time, Snoop from The Wire, deserve got nothing to do with it. And I would caution the Florida State trustees that deserve got nothing to do with it. And to tread very lightly as this moves forward. Because there's already a lot going on. Dan Wetzel reported this earlier today in regards to the Big Ten. And the crux of his article at Yahoo Sports is this. The Big Ten has begun some preliminary talks to potentially add Oregon and Washington, if they want to get to 18 schools, or Cal and Stanford along with those Oregon and Washington, if they feel like 20 is the number to get to. And the crux is this, quote, if the Big Ten is willing to work through the details, then this deal will get done. The 4 Pac-12 schools will jump at a membership offer. If so, the remaining of the so-called 4 corner schools, Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah, would almost certainly leave for the Big 12, making that league 16 teams strong. They may do it even before the Big Ten acts. That would be a bitter development for the current Pac-12 members left behind, Oregon State and Washington State. They would likely join the Mountain West Conference or maintain the Pac-12 brand and merge with any number of Mountain West schools. I'm sorry, Oregon State and Washington State are not enough on their own to preserve the Pac-12 brand. At that point, it's just the Mountain West Conference Platinum. It's Mountain West Conference extra bold. It's not the Pac-12 or the Pac anything if it does get to that point. But it is very simple. If the Big Ten wants any remaining 9 Pac-12 schools, it will get them. Those schools will say yes. Those schools will not be concerned about maintaining what is left of the Pac-12. They will take that invite. We have known that about Oregon and Washington. And even though Cal and Stanford are not the athletic programs or do not prioritize athletics in the same way as Washington and Oregon, they would not turn down that offer either. They would join the Big Ten. If anything, Stanford and Cal, as institutions of higher learning, fit in with the Big Ten. A lot more so than you would say Oregon does. Washington, as it happens, very good school. We don't think about it that way. And Oregon's not a glorified JUCO, don't get me wrong. But Washington's an outstanding school. The University of Washington is outstanding. They fit with the Big Ten. That's what they want. That's what Oregon wants. And if the Big Ten decides that's what they want to make happen, they'll make it happen. And then that leaves the 4 corner schools for the Big 12, which is, again, something we are kind of starting to assume is going to happen. But there's detail in that story, and it is a common theme with all of the reporting now about the possibility of more college football realignment. The idea that nobody wants to be responsible for, quote, blowing up the Pac-12. This is from Wetzel's article. The Big Ten has been reluctant to move to 20 teams, even if many in college athletics believe expansive super conferences are inevitable. One reason has been the hesitancy to deliver the final destructive blow to the Pac-12, although the poaching of UCLA and USC caused massive destabilization. Exactly. Wetzel gets it. Do you guys watch I Think You Should Leave on Netflix? It's one of my favorite things on Netflix. It's the sketch comedy show with Tim Robinson. It is screamingly funny. I quote and reference it all the time in my personal life. I find it to be very funny. There is one particular sketch where a gentleman in a hot dog costume drives a hot dog shaped car through the window and door of a clothing boutique store. And while everybody is shocked and trying to figure out what happened, the guy in the hot dog costume is in the middle saying, yeah, we're all going to find the guy who did this. The Big Ten is the hot dog guy. They want to talk about being hesitant to deliver the final blow to the Pac-12. I'm sorry, that's done. That damage has been done. UCLA and USC leaving the Pac-12, that blew up the Pac-12. The Trojans and the Bruins and the Big Ten all push the plunger. Nobody who leaves that league now should feel a shred of guilt. For Arizona and Arizona State and Utah and Oregon and Washington and Stanford and Cal and the state schools up in the Northwest too, the future of those schools individually, their athletic concerns and their athletic desires, those should be the top priority over the future of the Pac-12 conference because they don't have one right now. That conference's fate began to be sealed once they failed to keep their biggest football brand and their largest TV market. Once those slipped away, so too did the Pac-12. They weren't proactive enough, especially in contrast with the Big 12, and that's how you get left behind. And goodness knows, the Pac-12 had their chances. They had a chance to satiate UCLA and USC. They had a chance to poach from the Big 12 or merge with the Big 12. Remember, the Pac-12 offered the Big 12 an opportunity to merge, to ally together in the wake of Texas and Oklahoma announcing that they were leaving for the SEC. And the Big 12 declined at that point. Well, what you may not have known, what was reported by Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports last night, was that last year, George Kliavkoff came back to the Big 12 seeking an agreement or a merger. And the Big 12 said, nah, I think we're good. You know, we tidied up our own house. We added BYU and Houston and UCF and Cincinnati. We added 4 solid football programs. We're going to be okay. We're going to survive on our own merits. And what it all comes back to for the Pac-12, why they're in the spot that they're in, why the Sharks are circling, why the Pac-12 stands to crumble, why the Big 12 stands to expand to 16 teams if they want, why the Big 10 may expand to 18 or 20 teams if they desire. It's all down to institutional arrogance on the part of the Pac-12, going all the way back to Larry Scott believing that the Pac-12 network would generate supersized revenues based off of subscriber numbers, incorrectly gauging the interest and the fervor for your own programs in your own league and your own geographic footprint, failing to get distribution deals that could have helped you get to those subscriber numbers and get to those revenue projections. But it's not just Larry Scott's fault because George Kliavkoff went to market with a new TV deal or looking for a new TV deal, looking for $50 million per school, even after USC and UCLA announced they were out the door. Again, that's your best football brand, and that's your biggest TV market. And they thought they were going to get $50 million a year per school. They believed that's what they were worth. When the market told them no over and over again, they didn't listen. It's institutional arrogance. It's a high-mindedness that league has always had, going all the way back to the 70s, where they almost stayed at 8 schools. It used to be the Pac-8. They had a chance to add Arizona and Arizona State. They didn't really want Arizona State. Arizona State didn't fit. Frankly, I kind of understand that from an academic perspective. At Arizona State's kind of always been an odd fit in the same league with Stanford, or in the same league with Cal, or the same league with the Los Angeles schools. Arizona State's academic reputation is not that of those schools. But it's that high-mindedness. It's that institutional arrogance. And meanwhile, the Big 12 stands to survive because any institutional arrogance it might have had got smacked out of it when Texas and Oklahoma announced they were leaving. At that point, it became all about never mind arrogance, never mind being choosy. We've got to survive. We have got to do the best things for us, for our member schools, for our conference to survive, to make it. That means adding 4 quality, stable football programs. That means beating the Pac-12 to the TV deal that the Pac-12 now wishes they could have gotten done. That's what the Big 12 did. They went into survival mode, and the Pac-12 was too late to do it, and that's why the Pac-12 is not going to survive. At least that's how it looks and how it feels. It is amazing to read some of the anecdotes. The Ross Dellinger article, it came out late last night on Yahoo Sports, and I would recommend reading it if you have not yet. It is a wild ride. Some of the details in this article about the TV negotiations. Quote, one source described the presented TV deal, the one Klevkoff put in front of his members yesterday, as not suitable enough to keep all 3, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, within the league. After a year of TV negotiations with miscalculations and missteps along the way, could the deal somehow get better over a matter of days? If we'd had a good deal, we'd have presented it earlier, says one league source. Further details on that botched TV negotiation. In the end, ESPN and Fox showed interest, and still do, in providing a small window of linear exposure instead of, the primarily linear exposure offered by ESPN and Fox in the Big 12 TV contract. But monetarily, it is not enough to push the distribution figure higher than the Big 12 or even that close. For that to happen, it necessitated an entity offering a large guarantee on the front end. Is Apple's guarantee enough? In the most recent sign of desperate times, Pac-12 leaders last month approached NBC for at least the 3rd time in the last year, this time with a significantly low offer. The network passed. One Pac-12 insider said, quote, we were looking for a savior, but no one seemed to want to step up. Institutional arrogance. Thinking that a TV deal, a media rights deal, a cushy deal, exposure, linear presence was something that was owed to you. Based on what exactly? That's institutional arrogance oozing from that quote. We were looking for a savior. They thought that somebody was going to just hand them a TV deal because they're the Pac-12. Because they're the Conference of Champions, right? And never mind, USC's gone. That's your biggest football draw. Never mind, Los Angeles is gone. Your major TV market presence. No, somebody's going to owe us this, or somebody's going to bail us out of our own bad decision making. We're owed that because we're the Pac-12, the entitlement conference. Big 12 went and dug it out the mud. They went down to 8 members. They faced an existential crisis. They went and earned it in the dirt. They salvaged 4 more brand new members. They got a solid TV deal done. They're the stability conference. They're the merit conference. They earned this. And the entitlement conference seems on the brink of extinction. But at least there might be a safe landing for most of their members. The 4 corner schools, certainly, if they wanted to join the Big 12, they will be welcomed in with open arms. And I think all would be good fits, as I've described throughout the last few days as we've discussed this, as these theories, these theoreticals have started to feel more and more like real possibilities. And Oregon and Washington, They might find themselves a golden parachute by way of the Big Ten. And hey, maybe Stanford and Cal too, because there's certainly a match, academically speaking, with those institutions, as the Big Ten would then strike a major blow, be the first 20-team coast-to-coast super conference. Feel bad for Washington State and Oregon State. Doesn't look to be a parachute for them. But none of this had to happen. None of this might have happened if not for the institutional arrogance of the Pac-12. So you're a K-State fan, you're a KU fan, you're a fan or an alum of any of the other current or future Big 12 schools, because I'll include Colorado in that mix because they were proactive and they jumped. Be grateful that your institution and the Big 12 had no such preconceived notions of their importance in the world of college sports. Understanding that if they didn't go make it happen for themselves, the wheels were going to keep turning without them, whether they were on the bus or underneath it. We're going to take our first break here on 580 Sports Talk. When you come back, we're going to play a little One Gotta Go. Producer Kyle's going to join me. We'll play One Gotta Go. We're talking some Royals baseball later this hour. We got some Chiefs audio from training camp coming up later on. Tim Fitzgerald's going to join me at 4:35. Mitch Holthus at 5:25. A jam-packed show. We're just getting started here on 580 Sports Talk.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
You're ugly. You're disgusting. I'm going to kill you. Give me $200.
Well, gotta go.
Round of One Gotta Go here on 580 Sports Talk. And to play along, producer Kyle Manthe across the glass. Hi, Kyle.
Hello, Dan.
Ready to play One Gotta Go?
Always.
All right. So let's live in the world for a moment where the Big 12 does get to 16 teams by 2024. And those 4 new teams are Colorado, already confirmed to be joining the conference, along with Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah. And let's say you've got the budget to make 3 of those 4 conference road trips to Boulder, Colorado, Salt Lake City, Utah, Tempe, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. And it can be for whatever sport you desire, football or basketball. But those are the 4 road trips. You've only got the budget for 3, so one's got to go. Which one is it?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm definitely doing Colorado. I've somehow never been to Colorado.
Like the state?
The whole state.
The whole state?
I don't know how,
Kyle!
but I haven't. So I'm definitely doing that.
It's like a 4-hour drive. And I mean, granted, that's Burlington, Colorado. That's not
I always
basically Western Kansas, but
I always end up going east or south, and it's never west somehow. If I'm
Okay.
going west, it's in a plane. So
okay.
I think I'm gonna have to cut Tempe from that, because
Okay.
I want to go to Utah. Just get one of each. If Tempe, and if there wasn't 2 Arizona schools, I might not have done that. But I think Salt Lake City is probably the lowest. But I want to get a mix of all 3.
So I have been to Tucson, and I've been to Tempe, and obviously I've been to Boulder a couple of times. I've been to the Salt Lake City area, but I haven't really spent much time in Salt Lake City proper. They got great atmosphere at their football games. I think they would stay on my list for sure. I think, there's an argument to be made for leaving Tempe off because it's just Phoenix and it's miserable hot. I don't love the climate in Arizona. Not a big fan.
Mm-hmm.
But I could go and I can experience a game day at both Arizona and Arizona State because I've experienced basketball and football games in Boulder. So I maybe could leave Boulder off. I could get away with that. But in a world where I've got to choose one to not go, I'm not going to not do Boulder. So I say Tucson's probably out because it's just a touch too far from greater Phoenix to be able to go do anything after the game. Like Tucson's kind of its own thing. It's about 45 minutes to an hour from Phoenix. It's not like terribly far. That's how far I remember it being. I went there. I did a spring training trip with my buddies, 2010, I think. And, so when the Rockies were still training in Tucson, I think it was their last year in Tucson before they moved up to Scottsdale. Now nobody trains in Tucson anymore. But yeah, that drive's just long enough to have it not really feel like it's part of the valley. So yeah, I think I'd leave Tucson out.
Yeah, and after you bring up the point about the distance to the bigger cities like Phoenix, I'm going to join you with Tucson. Actually, I'm going to switch it from Tempe.
Okay.
But maintaining going to each different state and being able to do all 3 rather than 2 Arizona trips and leaving out Utah. Want to get a little variety.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. You have a one got to go for me today?
I do.
All right.
In the spirit of the Royals' walk-off Bach victory last night, I've got 3 different scenarios of funny potential ways to win or lose a baseball game. We've got a walk-off Bach. Someone misses a base. Either they don't touch home plate or they hit a home run. They miss first base when they're rounding. Someone misses a base in the eventual would-be end of the game run. So you get the final out of the game.
Okay.
By
appeal. The
by
walk-off appeal play. Okay.
And a bases loaded, catcher's interference.
I don't think I've ever seen that one. That one would be new. I have to pick one.
Which would be the least funny way?
Oh, the least funny way? Probably.
Or the most funny, however you want to play
the
it.
Funniest is definitely the balk. Because it's so funny. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next segment. But walk-off balks, man, they stay with you. I have a memory from, no joke, 15 years ago of watching a walk-off balk end a game. And it still sticks with me all these years later. But no, the least funny way is the appeal, because that's essentially like letter of the law, but not the spirit sort of violation. Like, you hit the ball over the fence, and in your moment of euphoria, you just kind of graze first base and step over it. I mean, technically, yeah. We got to go get that out. We got to go win the game. But that's too much about the rules and not about like actually something that really happened. So that's the least enjoyable way. I mean, to lose a game or win a game would be to the walk-off appeal play for me.
Yeah, depending on like where, who, what, like how it happens, it could make it much more funnier, but just the cut and dry definition of it, the amount of humor you'd like derive from that is going to be by how much you live and die by the rule book, rather than just the spirit of the game. So
it could be too like somebody annoyed, like Fernando Tatis Jr. hits a game tying home run and struts around the bases and forgets to touch third. Then it's hilarious.
Or if the St. Louis Cardinals did it.
Yeah, if it happened to the Cardinals or it happened to the Yankees, happened to the Dodgers. Yeah, then
it's hilarious.
Yes, then it would be hilarious. Anytime those teams lose, very funny to me. That's one got to go. We're going to take a break, come back. The Royals are red hot. Don't let them get hot. We'll talk baseball next on 580 Sports Talk. .345 on 580 Sports Talk. Dan Lucero flying the plane solo today and through the rest of the week. Brendan Brzezinski's vacation continues. Well earned. I think you'd all agree. He'll be back on Monday. Kyle Manthe is across the glass. Still to come on today's program, Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com for our Wildcat wrap-up at 4:35 and another training camp report with the great one, Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Chiefs, at 5:25. Hope you'll stick around for that. Text line 785-272-9429. Check us out on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/@SportsOn580. You can subscribe. That means when we are on the air, you will get the videos, the live videos up right on the front page of your YouTube when you go into YouTube. And We appreciate all. I think it's 307 subscribers now. Last I checked, we went up over 300 yesterday, which was very cool. And again, all credited to me. I did all of that. That was me, baby. Anyhow, Royals won again last night. And in case you missed it, they won on a walk-off balk. And I was telling Abby, my wife, about this. She had just gotten out of the shower. She's getting ready for bed. And I say, you missed it. The Royals won on a walk-off balk. And my wife knows baseball, but maybe not totally clear on the balk rule. So she asked me to explain it. And it turns out it's very hard to explain the balk rule. The best I could do in layman's terms is, you can't deceive the base runner when there's a runner on base. That's a balk, essentially. It's when you deceive the runner, whether intentionally or not. And what Mets reliever Ryan Walker did last night was indeed a balk, regardless of whether or not he was having trouble with his PitchCom device, which he may very well have been having. And I'm, to a point, sympathetic to whatever issues were going on as Walker came into the game with the bases loaded in a tie game in the 10th inning with 2 out. You can't pick up your foot from the rubber and then put it right back down on the rubber. You can't do that under any set of circumstances. If you're going to step off, you have to clear the rubber. You have to. It's a stone cold balk otherwise, unless time has already been called, and it had not been called. You cannot pick up your foot from the rubber and then put it back down on the rubber. It is a balk, is plain as day, and an extremely funny way for the Royals to win their 4th straight. An extremely funny way for the reeling Mets to lose on a day when they traded away Justin Verlander and officially ran up the white flag on their 2023 season. The thing about walk-off balks, they tend to be memorable. I have a very vivid memory, and this could just be me being a sicko, right? Like I freely admit that I am more apt to remember trivia like this. But winning or losing a game on a walk-off balk really sticks in your craw. It really hangs with you. I still vividly remember 15 years ago watching a game from my apartment in Wyoming where I was living at the time and watching Taylor Buchholz of the Rockies commit a game-losing, game-ending walk-off balk against the Braves. I remember it like it happened yesterday because I remember I just stalking into my bedroom and going to bed. It was around this time of year, too. It was around like late July, early August, and pretty much sealed the deal on whether or not the Rockies were going to be able to make a push in the National League West in the playoff race that year, the year after they went to the World Series. So, yeah, I remember that one. Walk-off balks stick with you. I have a feeling you'll remember this for a while, even though it happened in what has, again, been a very disappointing and miserable Royals season. You will have a chuckle 10 years from now when you see somebody balk and you're sitting next to somebody watching the game on TV, or maybe you're at the K and you go, hey, remember when the Royals won a game on a balk? Remember when they won on a walk-off balk? Yeah, it was against the Mets in 2023. It was hysterical. It was. It was very funny. It doesn't happen if the Royals don't pick themselves up off the mat after falling behind 6-4 in the extra innings. Bobby Witt Jr. and MJ Melendez with back-to-back run-scoring hits, and then the Royals were able to load up bases up and set up the walk-off balk. Speaking of MJ Melendez, in the second half, since the All-Star break, MJ's hitting .279 with a .333 on base and a .433 slugging percentage. Doesn't make him Ted Williams or anything, but it's good to see him being a little bit more productive. We had speculated before the All-Star break that no single player needed a few days away from the field more than MJ Melendez, given the disappointing season he's had. Man, it looks like he's recharged the batteries a little bit. Hasn't hit for a ton of power since the break, just 2 home runs. But the one thing that has been encouraging, legitimately, in those first 16 games, putting a lot more balls in play. He struck out almost 30% of his at-bats in the first half of the season, just a shade under 30%. And he was so far from that number last year in his rookie year that I really believe that for Melendez, it's not a worry about swing and miss as it is about bad swing decisions. Let me explain what I mean. when I say a player has a lot of swing and miss, that means that they swing and miss at good pitches. Pitches that you should hit, they don't. Like Drew Waters has a lot of swing and miss, you would say. And I think Nick Prado's got a little too much swing and miss. That swinging and missing, like not being able to catch up to a fastball in the zone or having trouble with spin in the zone. That's what I mean when I talk about, that's what most people mean when they talk about swing and miss. I think there's a difference between swing and miss and bad swing decisions where you're chasing too much out of the strike zone. You're tempted into swinging at bad pitches. I think MJ's been a little too tempted on bad pitches this year. But I think that he showed last season in a good enough sample size that if he's a little smarter with his swing decisions, he can still do some damage at the plate. And so far, 16 games in to the second half of this season, started to see some better results at the plate. And he's cut the strikeouts from nearly 30% to 23, short of 23% since then. Now, is that a great number still? 23%? It's not awesome. You'd like to see it a little lower. If you get under 20%, that'd be great. I think he was at 20% last year. I'm going to double check that number. But I think Melendez's strikeout percentage last year was something in the neighborhood of 25% was what it was, 24.5. Major League average is 22.5. So he's striking out right around Major League average right now. And as a result, with more balls put in play, with as hard as he generally hits the ball, with the attack angle at which he hits the ball, it's giving him some better results. So that's encouraging. That's good to see. And may it continue for MJ Melendez, who came up with a game-tying hit in extra innings last night. With the trade deadline done and dusted, the Royals can move forward. I'm sure there's a more relaxed energy in the clubhouse right now. I'm sure that the time around the trade deadline for a team that knows it's a selling team can be a time of unease, a time of uncertainty. But now that that's over, you know that the guys who are there are the guys you're going to play with for the next 2 months. They're there for good. And then you don't have the cloud hanging over some of the guys who are there but aren't going to be there much longer and kind of know they aren't going to be there much longer. And there's no cloud following the guys who thought, hey, maybe I'll change addresses. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But I think there's probably a bit of a more relaxed energy in the clubhouse now. And I think it's notable that the last few games, this winning streak that the Royals have been on, it's felt a little more like last year where you had the young guys driving the bus and you had a more youthful energy and excitement to the way games were unfolding, the way the games were being played. I think you're starting to sense that a little bit. I think some of that dissipated a bit when Vinny Pasquantino went on the injured list. I think and granted, I mean, that's not the reason the Royals are 33-75. They were struggling with Vinny in the lineup. But I think he was such an important factor in keeping the clubhouse loose and providing some of that energy as a young player coming up, just getting started, along with Witt and Melendez and the others. I think they've missed that for a while, but I think, and it's easier to see it when the team's winning, of course, but I think they're starting to recapture a little bit of that energy, a little bit of maybe that fun, because it sucks to lose as much as the Royals have. But to put together a winning streak, those are fun. Those are always fun, no matter what your record is. And so, again, long may it continue. I hope we continue to see that youthful energy, that vim and vigor from the Royals moving forward down the stretch here in 2023. They're back at it against the Mets tonight. First pitch 7:10, pregame 6:30 here on 580 WIBW on the Royals Radio Network. We're step aside for a break, wrap up hour number 1 here of 580 Sports Talk. In the 4 o'clock hour, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes spoke to the media earlier today at Chiefs camp. We will hear from them and have some thoughts on what the head coach and quarterback had to say, plus another round of What Is Wrong With You, and Tim Fitzgerald to GoPowerCat.com for a Wildcat wrap-up. He will join us at 4:35. That's all coming up after our national and local news here on 580 Sports Talk on WIBW. Let's get it. 580 Sports Talk. Hour number 2 on this Wednesday afternoon. Dan Lucero kicking it with you here on 580 WIBW FM News 104.9. Online, 580WIBW.com. And on the YouTube stream, youtube.com/@sportson580. Kyle Manthe across the glass. Brendan Rosinski somewhere drinking lemonade on the beach. He'll be back on Monday. Glad you're along for this edition of 580 Sports Talk. Great stuff coming up this hour, including another day of What Is Wrong With You, brought to you by Top City Metal Supply, and the Azura Credit Union Wildcat wrap-up coming your way with Tim Fitzgerald. Go powercat.com. Much to discuss with Fitz. Remember, a week ago, the last time we talked to Tim Fitzgerald, we were talking about the news that Colorado might join the Big 12 and what that might mean. Well, now not only are they definitely coming back to the Big 12, might be some other schools coming with them. Florida State doesn't want to be in the ACC anymore. Big 10 might go to 20 teams. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. We'll get Fitz's thoughts on that, as well as the latest news from K-State football and basketball. K-State basketball is going on overseas trip. It was just announced. They're leaving in a week. They're going to Israel and Abu Dhabi. So we'll ask Fitz how that came about and what K-State stands to gain from that overseas trip. That's all coming up with Tim Fitzgerald, the publisher of GoPowerCat.com. At the bottom of this hour. You are invited and encouraged to be a part of the program. Hit us up on the text line, 785-272-9429, or in the YouTube comments, youtube.com/@sportson580. If you go to YouTube and you search Sports on 580 WIBW, you'll find our channel. And on our channel, it'll be all of our video content, including our shows streamed live each day, plus the archive. You can go back. We've been doing this now close to a full year. I think we started doing this at the end of maybe the beginning of October, September into October last year. So we're close to a full year. And you can go back and you can watch those early YouTube streams. You can go see what we were talking about last November or this March or anytime you want. You got the archive on the YouTube page, and we got the archive of our podcast as well at 580WIBW.com on the podcast page. Couple of questions, one from the YouTube comments, one from the text line I wanted to get to. First, the text line asks, in the spirit of the Royals winning on a walk-off balk last night. Texter from the 785 asks, have the Royals ever lost a game on a walk-off balk? I had to do a little digging here, but I was able to find an article from back in 2015, and it is a comprehensive list of, at the time, what were the balk-off losses in baseball history. It was updated in 2016, but no update for last night's walk-off balk. But it does allow me to answer the question. Yes, the Royals have lost on a walk-off balk before. It has happened. Let's go take you back to July 4th, 2011. So the Royals were taking on the Chicago White Sox. The Royals had scored a run in the ninth inning to tie the game at 4. And on the mound, the former Washburn Rural Junior Blue Aaron Crow gave up a leadoff single to A.J. Pierzynski. Gordon Beckham sacrificed him to second base, and then a wild pitch moved Pierzynski to third. But Aaron Crow struck out Mark Teahan for the first out, former Royal turned White Sox. Then after a walk to Juan Pierre took second on defensive indifference, and with Adam Dunn at the plate in a 1-0 count, Aaron Crow committed a balk. That allowed A.J. Pierzynski to score with the winning run. So hopefully that answers your question. Yes, the Royals have lost in a walk-off balk at least once that I can find. The other question I wanted to get to from the YouTube comments, Mark asking with regards to the Royals in the late innings. They had a bit of trouble sealing the deal last night against the Mets. Dylan Coleman had a rough outing, and Carlos Hernandez gave up the 2-run home run to Francisco Alvarez in the 10th to put the Mets up 6-4. And Mark asks, is the closer position going to be random the rest of the season, or is it Carlos Hernandez now? I think Hernandez is going to get the first crack. The Royals have shown this year that they're willing to extend the work of their closer and bring in their best reliever earlier in a spot if they need to in the 8th inning or so. And Carlos Hernandez is built for that as a former starter. So I think he's going to get the first look. Right now, the rest of the bullpen mix, it's not great. There's not a lot of proven guys in the bullpen who've handled a lot of save situations. The most veteran guy right now in the Royals bullpen is Nick Whitgren, and he's certainly never been a regular closer. Taylor Clark has never done it, and he has really struggled in high leverage in the last month or so. Austin Cox is new to the role of both major leaguer and reliever. Dylan Coleman just doesn't throw enough strikes. I don't think Jackson Kowar and Jonathan Heasley are going to get those looks, particularly not Kowar since he was sent down earlier today. Tucker Davidson called up from AAA. Also, Cole Reagans was called up because he's starting today for the Royals. They made a couple of moves today, but they sent Kowar down, so it won't be him. I've said I think Jonathan Heasley probably has closer stuff, but that's a long way from getting closer results. Hell, Dylan Coleman has closer stuff. He also is walking a guy per inning, and that dog won't hunt. So I do, Mark, to answer your question, think it is going to be Carlos Hernandez for the short term, at the very least, who gets the opportunity. By the way, if you were curious, Scott Barlow made his Padres debut this afternoon as the Padres are finishing up a series against the Rockies in Colorado. Barlow faced 2 right-handed batters and struck them both out. And I'm not sure. No, that's a lie. He did throw a fastball to Eleuris Montero to strike him out. I did. I was watching at the time. I was going to say he hadn't thrown. It looks like he's still in the game. Looks like he's going to start the 7th for the Padres, who lead the Rockies 4-1. So working middle relief, high leverage right off the rip. Scott Barlow as a Padre making his debut after he was traded yesterday. Anyhow, let's talk some football, shall we? Actually, let's let the head coach and the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs talk some football. Earlier today in St. Joe, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes spoke to the media. We're going to hear from Andy Reid first. He didn't speak long, just about 4 minutes, but some interesting nuggets in here. So without any further ado, let's hear from the head coach of the Chiefs, Andy Reid.
And Kadarius, all those you're aware of. So all in all, good work today. I let the guys practiced hard. They challenged each other. It's always tough coming from a day off, but the tempo was great. And again, they caught a break with the weather. It's nice and cool out here. But I was impressed with how they challenged each other. Time's yours.
Andy, you're so process and grind oriented, but I wonder if you find yourself doing anything visually or verbally to sort of keep the suggestion planted about what the big goal is here.
Yeah, so with the locker room the way it is, the guys know, what the plan is and what this does for you when you come out and work hard. And so I've got good leadership there, and you can't do it without that. You can't do it without guys buying in and understanding it. I mean, they're willing to work and push themselves, which ends up paying off for them when the season starts and throughout the season. So they trust that. The new guys are trusting the old guys are telling them.
Joshua Williams was saying the other day that you've been saying edge as a sort of code word or keyword to keep them thinking about not being complacent. Is that correct? And
well, you want to maintain that. You want to maintain your edge as you go through daily. Make it a habit, and that edge helps drive you to be the best you can be that day. And then you finish that one, you line up the next day and do that. So it's a grind going through camp. Like I said, I mean, I like the effort that's being put forward. The mindset's good, so they're challenging each other, which is the most important thing.
See a guy like this Russ have a redshirt year to really learn the system and meetings to see how the guys operate on a week-to-week basis and have success so far in this meeting.
Yeah, he's doing good. That was a redshirt year that he probably didn't want to have, right, with the injury. But he's done a nice job. He had a good offseason. And then he's worked his tail off here, and he just needs to keep doing that. You know, it's how you answer the bell every day and push through it. So, but he's got the right mindset to do that.
Turk Wharton was back out there. What can he add to the defensive line now that he's getting healthy?
Oh, Turk has that great quickness and strength, great combination there, good pass rusher, and he's strong. You know, he's a strong player who has experience. So adding him into the mix is that's a positive thing for us. We just got to take it slow as we go with him and make sure he's okay. You know, ramp him up there.
What would be a timeline for Turk to kind of get back into the mix?
Yeah, we'll see. We try to keep open communication with him and just see how it goes. You know, day by day, and that's the best way to handle these type of things. So serious injuries.
I know a lot of training camps, right? How much beyond like rule changes, limiting hits, how much does your training camp evolve each year? How different is this year from last year? And
yeah,
when you get new ideas, where do they come from since you've been head coach for so long?
Yeah. So it's normally what you feed them, new plays, schemes, those type of things that challenges them. As far as the training camp goes, it's similar. Now the rules obviously dictate. We had a different conditioning program for the offensive defensive line. That means there's lightning. Offensive defensive line. You guys don't care. Offensive defensive line. So it. But other than that, we keep it kind of the same. You know, there's no easy way to get yourself into shape, football shape.
Last one, Sam.
You talk about it. Like, what comes to mind? How do you define it?
Yeah, challenge each other. And if you can do that, every time I line up, I'm going to do my best against that guy. That's the edge.
So that was Andy Reid from earlier today, speaking at St. Joe. Not a ton there, but did want to point out a couple of things that he had to say. The first thing, it was a topic that he discussed with his very first answer. It was also something that we talked about when Mitch Holthus joined us for our first training camp report on Monday. The idea that camp is hard. Andy Reid's training camps are notoriously tough camps, but they're hard for a purpose. They're hard because there's an understanding that you want to come out of the gates playing good football. And that if you are a coach and you want to run a difficult camp, you have to have buy-in from all of your players. Because if griping and complaining about the difficulty of camp is the kind of thing you can't get away from, that starts maybe in the first week of training camp. You got guys grumbling, guys saying, camp doesn't need to be this hard. What are we doing? What are we working this hard for? Why is he busting our butts like this? That's a good way to, I don't want to say lose a locker room, but it would show a lack of commitment to what needs to be done to win football games. And I think there's a broad understanding in this particular Chiefs locker room that all this hard work and the fact that it's a hard camp is the kind of thing that the veterans get behind, and they understand the benefits of it. The benefits are the 2 Lombardi trophies sitting at 1 Arrowhead Drive, right? Those are the benefits. You work this hard, you play well right out of the gates, you win games early in the season that other teams might give away, you get a higher seed, you win your division, you have an easier road in the playoffs. The games are easier when practice is hard. How many times have you ever heard a coach say that in your life? So Andy Reid reiterating that, yeah, it's tough, but we've got guys who are bought in and who are great leaders, and that's the kind of thing that pays off throughout the season. Other thing I thought was interesting was talking about Turk Wharton, who I think is going to be a really nice addition to the team coming off of his injury from last year. Now, I thought Wharton was really starting to come into his own before he tore his ACL early last year. And I think that's kind of an under-the-radar player that you probably, if you don't watch the Chiefs on a down-to-down basis, if you're just a casual NFL observer or casual Chiefs observer, you might not see it or know the name, but if you're a diehard, if you really watch the Chiefs, you really like watch the tape, so to speak. I think Turk Wharton's going to be one of those players that pops each week, making a play, helping keep guys fresh with his snaps on a rotational basis, helping out with the interior pass rush that's so important. I think it's big that the Chiefs have Turk Wharton back, and it's good to have him back at practice in full capacity. So that was Andy Reid. How about Patrick Mahomes? He also spoke to the media in St. Joe earlier today. Here's what the quarterback had to say.
You had the quote about Chris Jones. You want Chris Jones in training camp.
Yeah.
How much do you get involved? Do you talk to Chris? What's your role in this?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Chris, not necessarily about contract stuff. That's how I am about all things. I never talk about the contract. I just talk about football, how he's doing. And he's working out. He's staying in shape. All that will handle itself. And all I can do is just be supportive, be a teammate. I mean, that's one of the guys that's been a staple of this organization for a long time. So hopefully we get him back in camp as soon as possible. Your impressions of his training camp? Yeah, he's had a good one. Learning the offense fast. You can tell he's been in the offense for a year now. Obviously making big plays. And he's getting more involved in those first team reps. And so a guy that I have a lot of hope for, that he can be a really good player in this offense.
Messaging the teammates, how do you balance staying in the moment and the grind, but also kind of bringing up the big picture, just planning thoughts about that? Do you do a little bit of both?
We talked about that at the beginning of the first team meeting. You talk about the kind of the goal of the entire season, and then now it's every day. It's just getting better, making sure you're getting better in the classroom, getting better on the field, or watching film, whatever that is. And then whenever you get your opportunity, you go out there and make it happen. And that's all we kind of think about is day by day right now. And then I'm sure before that first game, we'll have that same conversation and then go game by game.
Do you have any kind of catchphrase that you just say, though, as a reminder of the big thing? Do you find yourself just saying? Or?
I'm not a catchphrase guy. I just try to keep guys motivated. That's just by continue to go out there and work, and just have that mindset every single day.
Generic today, just what have you seen from the beginning of camp on about what he brings to the table?
Yeah, I mean, he can catch the ball in the backfield. He can run the ball really well, and he's getting better and better with the protection stuff. So I think they're just continuing to get him reps. We're going to have a deep running back room, and it's always good to have those guys that we can trust to be in there for the big moments of the game.
I know coaches talked a lot about early in camp, especially push it. Don't be afraid to throw interceptions, and I know you embrace that. But is there a time in camp where you start scaling it back? Are there mileposts like, okay, now it's time to be more precise and the mindset changes?
Not necessarily. Just whenever you make a mistake, just don't do it again. I think just don't do repeat type of interceptions. If you throw a ball in a tight window, it gets tipped up or picked, I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's pushing it and trying to make it happen. If you throw a ball but if you throw a ball and it does get picked and it's not in the right spot and it's a bad interception in your brain, just make sure you don't repeat that same mistake, learn from it, and just keep moving on.
All right, 1, 2, 3, quickly.
Patrick, you're a guy that has been successful with the impromptu plays, on the field. Rick, you talked about Richie James earlier. Keep running.
Yeah.
How long does it take for a guy to, pick up on, for you to keep running?
Well, I think Richie's been doing a great job of it. There's just some things I tell guys that I don't think you do it a lot of other offenses. I was scrambling to the left, and he tried to work back, and I told him just run down the other sideline. I'll still throw it to you. And I know that's not really taught in a lot of other offenses, but just him having that mindset, knowing that the whole field's open at all times, and I'll throw it back across the field and try to keep it away from the defenders.
Competitive edge in you, and Andy talked about keeping that edge in the team. How do you instill that edge in the team?
Yeah, I think we all have it. We have a lot of guys out here that are super competitive. But it's about just doing it the right way. I mean, Trav punching the guy, not necessarily the way you want to do it, but you love the fire. You love the fire both sides of the ball, of trying to finish to the last second. But, I mean, that's just the type of guys we are. We're going to compete. We're going to argue out there on the football field, and we're going to love each other in the locker room because we got a lot of dudes that are super competitive on this team.
2 straight years we've done a lot of turnover in the wide receiver room. When was it last year that you sort of recognized that it was on the defensive?
Just out here. It's kind of how I feel this year. I mean, it's just when you have a lot of guys that can rotate in and that I trust is going to do the right decision and make the right play and make the play when they're called upon. That's when you know you're in a good spot. And I feel like that now. I mean, you look at our depth chart of receivers, and I've always said every one of these twos can make the football team. And that speaks to Brett Veets, Coach Reed, bringing in the right guys. And these guys working their tail off. And I mean, I've been in there with all type of different receivers, and we have a lot of guys that can make plays in that room.
All right, thank you. Brad has a plan.
So that is Patrick Mahomes, what he had to say earlier today in St. Joe. A couple of things to pull from that. Number one, he says every one of those wide receivers he's working with, he feels like can make the team. Now, obviously, that won't be how it ends. you have to cut somebody. You only have 53 guys. They can't all be wide receivers. But it does seem like every day we're hearing about somebody in that wide receiver group having a good practice. Whether it's, man, Rashee Rice was really good today. Or, man, Sky Moore looks much improved. Or, oh, man, Justin Ross popped again today. Today, it was Nico Remigio. That's not a name we're really thinking about as having a realistic shot to make the team, but he had a great day at camp. An undrafted guy out of Fresno State who might factor in the return game. There's a lot of real talent at wide receiver, but you know what makes wide receivers look really good? Great quarterback play and a great offense. And so that's the exciting thought, that Mahomes can elevate these guys and that it's a group with a higher talent level than I think probably nationally people will assume about the Chiefs. And then the other thing is I am getting very close to having to admit that I may have been wrong about Justin Ross. Not yet ready to eat my words, but I have purchased some sauces, maybe some little rub, some seasoning with which I can eat my words if that turns out to be the appropriate course of action for what I've said previously about Justin Ross. I have not believed that this is a real thing, a real chance of happening. More and more, the way people talk about him, the way people say he shows up in practice, I am starting to think it is the dark horse maybe has a little bit more wind beneath his sails than I anticipated to make this roster and maybe even make an impact for the Chiefs, Justin Ross. So I will eat my words if I must. That is what I will say. If it comes to that, I will be prepared to eat my words about Justin Ross. We're going to take a break here on 580 Sports Talk. Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com is coming up in just a bit. But first, we got our What is Wrong with You for this Wednesday on 580 Sports Talk.
hell? What the hell?
What is wrong with you on this Wednesday afternoon here on 580 Sports Talk? It is brought to you by Top City Metal Supply, who cuts the metal you need to your specifications, saving time, money, and material. Never settle when it comes to metal. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. I did it! I said it right. Halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. I finally said the word boulevard correctly on the first try. Big milestone for me. Kyle Manthe, producer, going to join us for this segment of What is Wrong with You, where we will see if we can dethrone yesterday's champion, the oblivious boyfriend, the guy from San Antonio who went to meet his girlfriend at a gas station and got shot at and managed to escape without being shot. But then when his girlfriend asked him to meet him 4 hours later at her house, showed up and got shot. Thankfully, he survived. He was shot twice in the leg. But I don't know. If I show up one place and my girlfriend is surrounded by a bunch of guys who shoot at me, I'm not going anywhere near my girlfriend. That's not my girlfriend anymore. Is really what it comes down to. That's not my girlfriend anymore after that. We got two news stories today. I'm going to start today, Kyle. We are going to Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, where we meet 45-year-old Sakayla Coles, who has been the director of parking enforcement for just over 3 years in Upper Darby. But she is being charged with theft, receiving stolen property, and related charges after a months-long investigation has led to allegations that she stole money collected from parking meters for her own use. According to the district attorney from Delaware County, Jack Stolzheimer, investigators believe Coles told employees to give all the coins collected from parking meters to an employee in her office, who would convert the coins into cash that Coles would then keep in her desk. In an interview with officers, Coles admitted to using these funds for the purchase of food, birthday cakes, office parties, and restaurant trips for her and her staff. Overall, Stolzheimer claimed that Coles has stolen $4,314, though about $2,037 of that had been returned. In a statement, Stolzheimer claimed Coles told officers she used the parking meter funds as a petty cash fund to be used by her office. Coles is currently out on administrative leave and awaits a preliminary hearing. Nobody likes to feed the meter, but these people in Upper Darby didn't know. They weren't feeding the meter. They were feeding the parking office. They were feeding them birthday cake, pizza parties. Turned into a petty cash fund for the office. I am almost positive that's not how it works.
No, obviously can't do that. I do respect the move to make it a whole office fund rather than just steal it and pay her own bills or buy herself cakes or whatnot. At least she was, distributing it throughout the whole office.
Yeah, at least she shared the wealth. She could have gone and bought her own cake for herself.
And so it was a multi-person scheme with the other employee taking the coins and converting them into cash. So it's good that she was, not just taking advantage of them as well.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, you're eroding public trust in the government by, taking money that's supposed to be deposited and using it for your own gain. But on second thought, at least she was also sharing the birthday cake. So who's to say who was really wrong? It was her. It was definitely still Sakayla Coles, the, I'm sure, soon to be former director of parking enforcement for Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. Your story has gone viral, and I'm just going to let you take it away.
It has gone very viral. We're going to stay in the Northeast, where a Boston police officer was injured after he was seen taking a violent ride down a giant metal slide in City Hall Plaza. The cop's tumultuous tumble was filmed from the foot of the steep new slide and has since gone viral on social media. Loud banging noises can be heard from inside the twisted tube before the cop suddenly appears at the opening of the slide, coming out feet first on his stomach, which is probably the funniest part of the video.
By far.
He straddles the edge of the slide and bangs his head on the other side before he's launched onto a rubber surface at the bottom of the slide. Another Boston police officer, Sergeant Detective John Boyle, said he was hurt and used his own personal medical insurance to be treated. He has lost no time and has since returned to work. When asked if the incident is being investigated, Boyle said, "I don't believe so." A Boston police spokesperson told the Boston Globe that the department is aware of the video and they're unaware of what caused the officer to be in the slide at the time of his fall. The immense slide, which is said to be the longest in the city, was unveiled as the centerpiece of the new $95 million renovation to City Hall Plaza in November and has been popular among the city's children, according to the Globe. And there's signs at the playground that indicate the slide is not intended for adults' use and should be only used by children ages 5 to 12.
So, like, on the one hand, yeah, just don't use it if it's not for your like age group. You must be this old to ride. Yeah, maybe don't go in there. But and I'm going to throw a picture up on the YouTube stream right now, so you YouTubers are going to see. I don't know how in the world you go down a slide and the end of your time on the slide, you look like this. We've got a picture on the YouTube. And he's coming down on his face with his feet up in the air, clearly unconscious. If you watch like the video of it, you hear banging around. It sounds like a hailstorm is occurring inside this metal slide. We can assume that he was knocked unconscious in the slide and that he was knocked back into consciousness from landing and skidding on the ground, and his extra bullet cartridge goes flying in every way. It's I've watched that video 20 times. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. I just want to know how at any age that's how your ride on a slide ends. That's how it goes for you.
It looks like he's trying to do a headstand while going down the slide.
Like, even if he had the thought, oh, I'm going to go down head first. Like, no, now he's feet first, but his face is on the slide. He's lucky he didn't go falling like out the side of the slide at the very top of it. Like, I just don't understand. I just can't get enough of this. I've watched the video. I'm not exaggerating. I've watched the video like 50, 60 times, and I laugh every single time. I've watched the one in reverse, too, and I laugh at that one, too. That is a tremendous story. I'm going to make that the winner for today, the cop who doesn't know how to slide the slide. But I don't know if that beats the oblivious boyfriend. I think the oblivious boyfriend advances strictly because I mean, he got shot at one time and then was like, no, I'll go back and hang out with my girlfriend again. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. I'm sure that was just an accident, just a coinkydink.
Maybe if the cop had gone down a second time, maybe then we'd give it to him. But
Vance in the YouTube comments says that the officer must have flunked recess in grade school. That's a good line. All right, that's our winner for today, but it's going to be the oblivious boyfriend who advances on What Is Wrong With You for another day. What Is Wrong With You? Brought to you by Top City Metal Supply. Metal cut to order when you need it. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. 2 for 2, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com joins us next on 580 Sports Talk.
FM 104.9.
Timber! Fitzgerald is insane!
It's a great day to be a Wildcat.
I felt like that would be a bad idea to be all sticky.
You win that dang day.
I'm not a big fan of sticky.
What a great day to be a Wildcat.
It's a big Kansas State victory.
It's always a big victory when we welcome in Tim Fitzgerald to GoPowerCat.com for our Azura Credit Union Wildcat wrap-up. We do it every Wednesday at this time here on 580 Sports Talk as Fitz joins us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline. Fitz, much has changed since we talked to you. Last week, we were talking to you about Colorado maybe joining the Big Ten. And now Florida State's got a gun to the ACC's head, and the Big 12 might have 16 teams, and cats and dogs are living together. My first question to you is just your general reaction to, now that we know it's official, Colorado's back in the Big 12, benefit for the league and benefit for Colorado in rejoining the league.
I think it's mutual. Honestly, I think Colorado in the short term benefits more. I mean, they're going to improve their finances, move back towards recruiting in Texas. But I think in the long run, it's really going to benefit the Big 12 to have them back in. First of all, it's a good look to recover one of the schools that left. I think a couple others should probably consider it, but they won't. It's a fun game for all of us who like to go to Colorado. It's great to have that state back in the fold, but I think in the short term, it benefits Colorado more than the Big 12. But then again, if this sets off what we think will happen with at least one more edition, if not three more editions from the Pac-12, then it'll be really good for the Big 12.
If you had to put a number on it, the percent chance you think that Arizona is a Big 12 member for 2024, what number would that be?
95%. I think there's always 5% chance that the president will, kind of back away from it, because it sounds like Arizona State and Utah aren't ready. If that happens, I think Brett Yormark just adds UConn, because you got to get to 14. You really need to be at an even number. And then they'll just wait and see. But from everything else that's going on, if you're one of those four corner schools and you hesitate, you could get left out of everything. Because as you mentioned, if the ACC comes open, that's going to move a lot of schools ahead of, the other schools from the West, in the Big 12 pecking order. There's a lot of great properties maybe to bring into the Big 12 out east. And I think maybe you just want to get four total out west. So that would be two more spots out west. It's fascinating. I don't know how the Big 12 is going to balance all this, let alone get permission from your rights holders to go ahead and keep adding. We'll see how this plays out.
Particularly given the reporting earlier today from Dan Wetzel and others that now the Big Ten is willing to entertain the idea of more westward expansion in a way that maybe publicly they weren't up until maybe 48 hours or 72 hours ago. What are Arizona State and Utah waiting for? What is their holdup, particularly if Arizona State is theoretically, metaphorically speaking, kind of on the 2-yard line and driving in?
Yeah, in reading some stuff from out west, more fans, it sounds like Arizona State's president is dreadful. I mean, it's the university athletics is not thriving under him, and he was an active supporter of the Larry Scott tragedy, and he seems to be still sold that the Pac-12 will survive. Meanwhile, Dan Wetzel is, reporting that the Big Ten is now not just courting Oregon and Washington; they're also looking at Cal and Stanford to get 6 out west. Now, I'd find that stunning, to be honest. I think maybe 3, probably 2, but 4 seems a lot. But now I'm reading that Utah's like, well, hold on. If they're going to take 4 out here, we should be in that 4 instead of Cal. And yeah, that's a game of chicken that you want to play with your athletics department. If you don't win that battle and the Big 12 moves on from you and goes eastward, you're left. You're just left behind, and I wish them luck in that gamble, because I think if they're going to add schools, they're going to go for those big academic schools in Cal and Stanford with the huge endowments. That's going to be high on the Big Ten's list.
Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com joining us here for the Azura Credit Union Wildcat wrap-up on 580 Sports Talk. Fitz joins us every Wednesday at this time on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. You can check him out on Twitter at Life of Fitz, and, of course, read him and his staff at GoPowerCat.com. Which of the schools that we've just discussed, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, if those three, along with Colorado, all join the Big 12, which of those four schools do you think is best equipped for long-term competitive success in football and men's basketball?
The combination gets interesting, doesn't it? I mean, Utah certainly in football and Arizona in basketball, but let's be honest, all four of those schools have had their deficiencies in being completely rounded athletic departments. And I would guess I might go with Utah because I think football leads the way still to a degree. Arizona is a great addition for Brett Yormark's basketball play. And as I mentioned, Arizona State just has kind of fallen on hard times, maybe partially from neglect in college athletics. And, you know, I think they might be a little behind. And Colorado has struggled in both sports. But I think from a geographical standpoint, Colorado and Deion Sanders being able to access Texas recruiting, and maybe Chad Boyle can get basketball rolling again at Colorado. I think they're intriguing.
All right, let's talk about some K-State sports news. Some news earlier today that the men's basketball program is going overseas. K-State is headed to Israel and Abu Dhabi later on this month. What do you know about how that opportunity came about for Jerome Tank's program?
I really don't know much about it. I reached out a couple days ago with some details, and I didn't get much. I do appreciate any time I have the opportunity to say Abu Dhabi. I mean, it's just, it's fun. You know, anytime you get experience overseas, you can go have the bonding experience of taking your team over there and playing some games. It's really important. And they're doing this in the midst of still needing, you know, to fill two spots on this roster. If they can get it done here in August, it'll be very interesting. But yeah, I mean, these experiences can, you know, help this team get advanced a little bit, maybe ahead of where they were a year ago early in the season. I remember that Elite Eight team struggled to win a Cal. So they kind of got off to, you know, a slow bonding start. And I think this will help this team get ahead of the curve.
Who do you think benefits, which group of players benefits most from the opportunity to play some exhibitions and have this travel opportunity? Is it the younger players? Is it the newcomers from the transfer portal, Kaluma and Perry? Who benefits the most from a trip like this?
Well, those two guys are a little more proven on the court. I think you're right, and it's the younger players, the Todd Manning, all the guys who redshirted or didn't play much last year to try to show where they belong in the mix of this team, at least at this point, is really important. Get a little more, you know, live game experience than, you know, sitting on the bench during most of the season last year. So I think the youth really have an opportunity to prove themselves. I'm intrigued by Jarrell Colbert. Can he step forward and really be the type of big man that they need him to be? And if so, that really answers the question about this roster.
Our guest is Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com. This is the Azura Credit Union Wildcat wrap-up here on 580 Sports Talk. Fall camp getting underway for Kansas State football. The defending Big 12 champions set to start practicing and get things rolling. What positions are the most interesting to you for this Wildcat team as fall camp gets underway, as far as where there's still some playing time to shake out, some position battles that might still be ongoing? Which positions are the most interesting to you going into camp?
I think, you know, they need another safety, another corner really to step up. So the back end of the defense intrigues me. Depth at nose tackle is something I like to keep an eye on, although they're raving about Uso and the progress he's made. And the rotation at receiver. I think, you know, having some guys step up. Keegan Johnson, the Iowa transfer, is ready to be a star. We'll see. But if they can sort out those three spots on the field, this is going to be a really good Kansas State football team.
We know, obviously, Ben Sinnott back and Phillip Brooks is back at wide receiver. Who do you expect to take the biggest step forward at wide receiver this season to complement those two top targets for Will Howard?
I think the guy that I want to keep an eye on is the most experienced, and that's Phillip Brooks. because some of the stuff they ran for Deuce Vaughn, I can see them running for Phillip. Maybe even lining him up in the backfield to replicate some of those pass patterns, because he too in space is a real issue with his moves and his speed. So I just think he's going to be a bigger part of this offense, and he has a lot more to give this offense than what he's done the last couple seasons.
How about in that back end for the secondary? Obviously, 2 starting cornerbacks lost. Kobe Savage getting a lot of preseason buzz. He's on the preseason watch list for the Nagurski Award, and I think it stands to have an outstanding season at one of the safety spots. But is there a corner or a safety prospect that maybe intrigues you more than others? It could be a name to watch for in this camp to earn some more playing time.
I think Marcus Siegel at the safety spot is really intriguing to me. I'm intrigued by Kobe. I mean, he's coming off a pretty bad knee injury, and sometimes that takes a while once you get into full contact, full speed football to really trust that. And how quickly can he acclimate? Because if he can do it quickly, I think he's one of the top safeties, not just the Big 12, but maybe the nation. And if he can stay healthy the whole season, we're going to have another guy emerge at safety for Kansas State that is going to go on to the next level, because I think he's NFL good.
You mentioned nose tackle, Eli Huggins departing, but you mentioned Uso. That was a name that Chris Kleiman mentioned quite a bit during Big 12 Media Days. And Chris Kleiman, as we've talked about, always very intentional with who he singles out.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there have been raves about Uso Senelau and what he could bring to the defensive line, I don't think that's a mistake. I certainly think that he's got some upside. Who else are you looking at on that defensive line as a potential contributor? I don't want to say impact player, but potential contributors up front.
Well, I think Khalid Duke is an intriguing story. You know, that he was supposed to be the star defensive end that got hurt. Felix Anudike-Uzomah stepped up. He came back at the start of last season. They moved him back into a linebacker spot, and he learned a little bit more how to play in space, which I think was good for him. But now he's going back to defensive end. So I just really want to see what kind of defensive end he's become. Can he step into that rush end spot, even though he's a little bit more of a power rusher instead of that agile, corner guy that Felix was getting around that tackle? I'm really interested to see if he's ready to take the step up that we expected from him 2 years ago before the injury set in.
Tim Fitzgerald is the publisher of GoPowerCat.com. He joins us every Wednesday on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline for the Azura Credit Union Wildcat wrap-up. Fitz, great work at GoPowerCat.com, and right now you're running a heck of a VIP sale for people who might want to get subscribed in time for the start of football season.
Yeah, I see someone, did that today. 75% off for a subscription at GoPowerCat.com right now for an annual sub. And it's true for all the 24/7 sites. If you're a KU fan or another Big 12 fan or any fan, you can find your site and go get a 75% off your first year at 24/7 Sports. It's great. And Dan, I want to leave you with one of my favorite jokes in honor of this segment. Did you know that folks in Saudi Arabia don't like the Flintstones?
I did not know that.
But don't worry, the folks in Abu Dhabi do. There you go.
Oh, thank you, Fitz. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week.
No problem.
That is Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com. Hour number 3 of 580 Sports Talk coming up after the national and local news. Let's get it. Final hour of the day here on this Wednesday edition of 580 Sports Talk. I am Dan Lucero. Brendan Brzezinski's on vacation. He'll be back on Monday. Kyle Manty is our producer for today's program. And you, whoever you are listening, whether you're listening on 580 WIBW, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com. We're on the YouTube stream. Hi, gang. The YouTube stream, youtube.com/@sportson580 is the YouTube channel where you can watch our live and archived video streams of all of our shows here on the 580 Sports family of programs. Appreciate you being along. We got one more hour to go. Our thanks to Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com for that truly terrible joke that made me laugh that I'm still thinking about. Abu Dhabi do. Yeah, it's pretty good. Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com, joining us for the Azura Credit Union Wildcat wrap-up. If you missed that conversation or anything else we've done so far today, you can find it, again, on our video archive. You can click on our streaming video, and you can fast forward or rewind and start from the beginning. You can click right now and rewind and listen to any part of the show and catch up with us when you're ready to catch up with us live. You can watch the archive video once we're done here, or you can check out the podcast page, 580WIBW.com. Hover over that podcast tab at the top, click 580 Sports Talk, and you can find hour-by-hour breakdowns of the show every day. We'll have a little more K-State talk for you coming on overtime today. We do have overtime leading up to K-State to Royals baseball at 6:30. As Kellis Robinette joined Jake and Fulton on Mic'd Up earlier today, and we'll rerun that conversation as our 580 Sports Talk overtime conversation of the day. Still to come on today's show, Mitch Holthus is going to join us in about 20 minutes or so. The voice of the Chiefs will join us for the third installment of his training camp reports, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Azura Credit Union. Plus, your comments from the YouTube stream, your text as well, 785-272-9429. But we began this hour, as we do every 5 o'clock hour, with our 580 Sports Talk headlines. And we have to start today with the Board of Trustees meeting that Florida State University held earlier today. It was streamed online, available to the public. We heard from Florida State President Rick McCullough. We heard from some trustees, including former Florida State quarterback Drew Weatherford. And the tenor and tone was very straightforward. You didn't have to do any reading between the lines to know what Florida State was talking about. They aren't happy in the ACC. They don't think they can compete with the media rights deal that the ACC has for the next decade plus. And they want out. Drew Weatherford himself said, it's not if we leave, it's when we leave the ACC. What makes it so fascinating that Florida State was so public with this, because it is obviously intentional, 100% intentional, that they aired this entire Board of Trustees meeting. You could watch it online if you wanted to, but all of this stuff was public. In contrast to the Board of Regents for the University of Arizona, who met earlier this week, and the only part that was live streamed over the internet that was public was the part where they voted to go into executive session, which and shut off the live stream and made everything they said from that point forward private. The reason that this was publicly done is because they are publicly courting something. I don't know what the end game is necessarily for Florida State, whether it's more money from the ACC, whether it's a spot in the SEC or the Big Ten. Certainly, if they want out, it's publicly courting a way to leave the ACC that doesn't require the $500 million exit fee that they would have to pay. Pretty big exit fees right now for the ACC schools, if you were not aware. But it's in stark contrast to the way that realignment has gotten done in college athletics. It has not been the school stepping forward and saying, we want out. We're not happy. We want to leave. Come and get us. Make us an offer, SEC. Make us an offer, Big Ten. That's essentially what Florida State did today. And that contrasts with, like, UCLA and USC leaving for the Big Ten was a secret until the whole world knew about it. Same goes for Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. Same goes really for Colorado leaving the Big 12 for the Pac-12 and then 11 years later leaving the Pac-12 to come back to the Big 12. This wasn't done publicly. This was done in private. This was done in conversations with lawyers. This was done with lowered Sato voices and not in public and a board of trustees or a board of regents meeting like this. That's generally how this business gets done. So that's why it's remarkable what Florida State and their board of trustees did earlier today. So between that and Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports reporting earlier today that the Big Ten is sniffing around Oregon and Washington and maybe Cal and Stanford too, if they decide they wanted to go to 20 schools. I would just say this. It's starting to feel like, yes, the Big 12 is in a good spot right now, stable, solid media deal with ESPN and Fox, good linear presence. They've added Colorado. They're in a spot to add more, to add Arizona and Arizona State and Utah potentially. If those schools have interest, the Big 12 will take them. But if Big 10 gets to 20, then the SEC is going to want to get to 20. Then the ACC is going to have to do something to get to 20. Or maybe the Big 12 is going to have to do something to get to 20. And then eventually you have these giant mega conferences of 20 teams, which those don't feel like conferences at all. Because if you're only playing 9 conference games in football and you're in a 20-team conference, you do the math. You're playing 9 of the 19 possible teams. And you're playing, that means it would be at least every 3 years before you played everybody. And so what happens at that point is, well, we'll just schedule a little more regionally. You know, we'll schedule the regional rivals against each other. The SEC is not going to stop scheduling, you know, Alabama and Auburn or Florida, Georgia. They're not going to stop scheduling those games. The Big 12 isn't going to stop scheduling, you know, Texas Tech and Baylor or Kansas State or Kansas, Iowa State. They're going to have to schedule in ways that make sense regionally, geographically. And in effect, it feels like we're going to come in a roundabout way to what we used to have before, what conferences were in like the 50s and 60s. Teams regionally playing each other. And every now and again, playing teams outside of your region, but in your conference. But it does feel like we're going to kind of come in a roundabout way if we get to 20 with these. If we end up with 4 mega conferences of 20, let's imagine we get there. Actually, you know what? Hold that thought. We might do that tomorrow. That might be a segment on tomorrow's show. What 4 20-team conferences might look like. But that's our first 580 Sports Talk headline. Lots of noise, a little saber rattling going on at the Florida State University Board of Trustees meeting today. Next 580 Sports Talk headline, and this is a growing story that, to my opinion, is the dumbest sports gambling scandal that we're ever going to have. We told you yesterday about Iowa State quarterback Hunter Deckers and his involvement in sports gambling, and that a criminal complaint has been filed against the starting QB for the Cyclones, charging him with tampering with records related to the criminal probe into sports gambling. Now, you might have been wondering, well, what did he do to tamper with records? Well, Hunter Deckers was not of age to be gambling when he was doing all this gambling. I think in Kansas, you have to be 18. In Iowa, you might have to be 21. But either way, it appears that Deckers was making bets and he's accused of placing 26 wagers on Iowa State sporting events, including the 2021 football game against Oklahoma State when he was a backup quarterback, did not play in the game, and 366 approximately total wagers, and made them under someone else's name to try and obscure his identity, even though he was doing it from his phone and from locations that could easily be geotagged as like the Iowa State football facility. So we told you about that yesterday, and Deckers is in deep trouble if they find out that he was gambling on Iowa State sporting events. That the penalty for that is a loss of eligibility. So that would be it for Hunter Deckers as an NCAA student athlete. He will not participate in fall preseason camp in order to focus on his studies and on the defense of this criminal charge, according to a statement released by his attorneys. So we knew about that involvement. We also know 2 other current Iowa State athletes have been charged with tampering with records. Sophomore wrestler Paniro Johnson, who was a Big 12 conference champion last year, and he placed approximately 25 bets on Iowa State events and placed wagers totaling $45,000 on approximately 1,200 bets. Yo, Paniro got bankroll. The other current Iowa State athlete is Dodge Saucer. He is a sophomore offensive lineman and alleged to have placed 12 wagers on Iowa State football games, including 4 games last year, and to have wagered $3,000 on DraftKings. Again, the rules are very straightforward on this as far as gambling. If you do it on your school or on your team, the penalties are a loss of your college eligibility. Those are the 3 former current Iowa State athletes. I say former, not yet. That seems like a matter of time. The former Iowa State player who is being charged is a player we already knew was tied up in gambling because he got suspended for an entire NFL season for it. That's former Cyclone defensive lineman Enyi Uwazurike, who was alleged to have bet on college and NFL games in which he played. He was alleged to have placed approximately 32 wagers on Broncos games and individual Broncos players as a rookie on the Broncos last year. And the account controlled by Uwazurike completed approximately 801 online sports wagers totaling over $21,000. Boy, get on Paniro's level. Yep. Paniro got the big bank. He got the big bankroll making those wagers. Anyway, the report alleges 5 Broncos games on which Uwazurike bet, including 2 in which he played. The game against the Chiefs on December 11th, the game against the Cardinals, December 18th. He's already been suspended by the NFL last month for betting on NFL games. In the complaint, which you can view at the Des Moines Register, the tampering with records suggests that he made bets in someone else's name. And that's someone else. I think I'm trying to see. There's some information that's redacted here, but the complaint reads: Uwazurike engaged in a scheme with Rachel Louise Francis, enabling Uwazurike to disguise his identity and manipulate online/mobile transactions in order to create the appearance that sports wager transactions conducted by Uwazurike were made by Francis. So not only did these guys step in it with regards to their eligibility to play, they're also now facing some like major charges, like the kind of charges you don't want to face. You don't want to mess with the feds. And that's what these guys are dealing with. So also, it's not just that. There are also Iowa student athletes who are being investigated. Chad Leisticow reporting this on Twitter earlier today. He covers Iowa sports. Documents show former Iowa basketball player Aaron Ulis made 1,850 wagers totaling $34,800 on FanDuel, some while underage, using a fake name, including betting on NCAA basketball and at least one Iowa game. He's now at Nebraska. I don't think he's going to play for the Huskers. Also, according to a new complaint, Iowa walk-on kicker Aaron Blom Bet the under on the Cyhawk game in 2021. Look, we've all bet the under on the Cyhawk game. Every one of us. We've all done it. It's just smart to bet the under when Iowa and Iowa State play. But it's not smart when you're on the team and you know you can't play anymore if you make bets on your own team while you're on the team. By the way, the under did hit in the 2021 Cyhawk game because, of course, it did. Over-under was 45. Iowa won 27-17. Blom wagered 170 times under his mother's name for $4,400 while underage. On DraftKings, there's also former Iowa baseball player Garrig Christensen accused of operating a scheme with his mother in this criminal complaint from the Johnson County Attorney's Office. Christensen is accused of using a DraftKings account to place a total of 559 underage wagers, including approximately 23 wagers on Iowa sporting events. Documents allege Christensen made wagers with his mother's consent, and she helped set up the account. She said it was, quote, a silly mistake to register the account for her son's use. Look, there's a lot about parenting I don't understand, not being a parent myself. But this is sort of like buying your kids booze, right? Like I guess I've never understood that. Like, I'm going to buy my kids alcohol when they're underage. When they can't buy booze, I'm going to buy my kids booze. And I'm going to let my kids bet on sports. I'm going to set up a gambling account for them while they're underage. What do you gain from that? What is the end game here? A silly mistake. You did it 600 times. And for what? For what? A few bucks? You come out ahead? You don't. Not in the long run. That's the thing about sports gambling, right? The house always wins. Unless you strictly bet the under on the Cyhawk game, then you probably come out ahead in the long haul. In fact, betting the under on Iowa football, a good way to profit, as long as Brian Ferentz is still in town. But man, what is the end game? What is the appeal of doing this while you're underage to the point where your parents are setting you up to do this? Yeah, sure, Garrig, go ahead. Gamble. Break the rules. Blow up your eligibility. Light your college baseball career on fire. Go ahead. They won't be able to trace it to you. Just incredible stupidity on display. Again, I'm telling you, I'm here to tell you as a former college athlete, briefly, but it still counts. Compliance, NCAA compliance, the compliance office at the school where you are, they tell you you can't do this. They tell you what the penalties are. And I know there are people who say, well, this is what happens when you make sports gambling so, you legalize it in more places and you advertise it and you make it more appealing. It's still not worth blowing up your career, blowing up your eligibility. You can bet all you want once you graduate. Hell, you can even bet once you're of legal age on the NBA or whatever it is, and you won't lose your eligibility, but you'll still get in trouble. It's just not worth it. Wait. Come have fun with us on FanDuel or whatever site you want to use when you're out of college, when you don't blow up your career. It's so short-sighted. It's so stupid. It's so easily avoidable. They know. They're told. And they do it anyway. And they deserve this. Every bit of what's coming their way. That's it for our 580 Sports Talk headlines. Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Chiefs, joins us for a training camp report next on 580 Sports Talk. 528 on 580 Sports Talk. Dan Lucero hanging out with you, Kyle Manthe across the glass, and we are, for the third straight day, pleased to be joined by the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, for the third installment of Mitch's Training Camp Reports, brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azura Credit Union. Ask Haven Byrne, Crystal Rippey, or Melissa Hunter about using the credit union advantage for your home loan. Mitch, today we get to talk about and hear from Travis Kelce. And when you talk about the all-time talents to take the field in the history of the NFL, there's going to be Travis Kelce's going to be a guy we talk about in the history of the league 20, 30, 50 years after he hangs it up. He is going to leave quite a legacy, not just as a Chief, but as one of the best to ever play at his position.
I chuckle, Dan, when people say, hey, he's, one of the best, or is he the best? And really, when you compare what he has done in a 10-season span, there's nobody that's comparable. And it gets, I did every one of Tony Gonzalez's games when he was a Chief. And I was with Tony, did a presentation with him during the draft here in Kansas City. Love him. Great. But let's just back up a second. Last year, Travis Kelce, okay, we know about the 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons, NFL record for a tight end. But many of those years are way north of even 1,000 yards. But last year, on touchdown receptions, only Devontae Adams of the Raiders had more. And Kelce had none the last 6 weeks of the regular season. Receptions for first downs. Justin Jefferson was number 1 in the NFL with 80. Kelce was second with 78. When you look at postseason in receptions, this is all-time history, NFL postseason. Receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, 100-yard receiving games, which is the base subjects, right, for wide receivers. Kelce second to only Jerry Rice in all 4 of those categories. What Kelce has done has changed the league. Now we list it as pass catchers. It's not like, just for tight ends or for wide receivers. When Jerry Rice is the only guy better than Kelce in those 4 main postseason areas of for receivers, then there's nobody so close to it. Maybe Gronk, but he's got way more yards, 159 more yards than Gronk. And then also he's sitting here with overall catches. He's got 35 more catches than Gronk, and Gronk played 4 more postseason games. It's not even close. So you're right. He's just all by himself when we start talking about great tight ends.
And he is, though, I think we get a chance to see a side of Travis Kelce that is playful, that enjoys life, that enjoys having a good time. When he gets between the white lines, he's all about winning, isn't he?
No question. And he's been able to somehow reinvent himself. He is a war horse. He has played 5,500 snaps with Patrick Mahomes as the starting quarterback. And he's 33 years old. But he acts like, and his attitude is such that it's almost like he's done none of that. He's able to somehow get his mindset and his approach physically and mentally to start all over again. And right now, instead of red light, let's celebrate what he's done, it's green light.
It's go time. We know, the past is the past at this point. We got our eyes set on this year. And it's exciting. It's exciting, when you go out and you get one, there's a lot of energy just to be around the guys again. And with that being said, I think Coach Reed and, the front office, everybody that's been involved with this organization over the past couple of years has kind of set the tone on, the work ethic that we show, and from day one. And day one's already started. So we're on the grind to get this thing again.
His work ethic was outstanding again this offseason. There was one time after an OTA, I go, are you trying to make the team? And he just chuckled. He goes, I can't. This is the way I do it. And so, yes, he's 33. Yes, they're trying to manage his load, but he doesn't take plays off. The other day, the day Najee Johnson got hurt, whatever day that was, the storm blew through. We went indoors. He was working with the offensive linemen some. He ran down to work with the offensive linemen. They're all cheering, and the O linemen are all kind of, patting him on the back and stuff. But that's just what he does, because he was working on his blocking. I mean, we talk about Holmes being a unicorn. this is another unicorn in this pasture by himself for the next face on that Chiefs Kingdom Mount Rushmore.
Mitch Holthus is joining us here on 580 Sports Talk, the voice of the Chiefs, joining us for his training camp reports, brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azura Credit Union. We heard Mahomes speak earlier in training camp and talk about Travis Kelce and allude to how much he loves the grind and say even loves training camp. I don't know that anybody loves training camp necessarily, but you kind of spoke to that just now, the fact that the grind and the desire to get better, that's something that Travis Kelce seems to truly embrace in a way that not a lot of guys at his station or that his stage in his career would seem to.
Well, we like to make comparisons with Patrick Mahomes in that regard, right? We talk about Steph Curry or we talk about Michael Jordan, but why don't we say that about Travis Kelce? We should, because he's got the same demeanor of greatness, incredible competitiveness. In the biggest moment, he makes the biggest plays. And he, again, and you alluded to it, I think it's good for him. I think that's part of his charm and personality now is the fact that the New Heights podcast is, what, the greatest podcast ever, at least a sports one. His appearance on Saturday Night Live, he was great. That reminded me of the old-time Saturday Night Live episodes. It's actually funny. I think that program's got a real problem with writing. It's like, who can write for this? Well, he was great. I call him Sucre. I'll say, hey, Don, Sucre. And but he's an engaging dude. I see what he does with 87 and running. I mean, he's set up for when his career is over, but it's far from over. But when you look at where he's at historically, from a statistical standpoint and a winning standpoint. By the way, Jerry Rice played 18 postseason games, and Jerry was 10-8. Kelce's 12-6. There's just things that people don't discuss with Kelce, and it's hard to say that he's underrated, but he really is when you compare him to the entire history of the league.
At what point, this may be the most important question I'll ask about Travis Kelce. At what point, because you've covered Kelce his entire career. You remember when he was a young pup, mid-round draft pick, dealt with the injury early in his career, had some issues, maybe letting his temper get the best of him at times, took a lot of penalties early in his career, to now being a respected elder statesman, leader, all-time great in the game. But at what point in getting to know Travis and covering Travis did you think this is going to be a guy who hosts Saturday Night Live and is really good at it someday?
Oh, I kind of saw that early on. We saw it behind the curtain that he had this kind of wit and charm and loved comedy. And so even though he had the issues and the penalties, and I remember the fumble against Arizona, which you could say probably kept us out, is controversial, but it kept us out of the playoffs the only year we didn't make it with Andy Reid as head coach. But we saw he's always been a fun dude. He's always been a guy that you're glad he's on your team. And I love it, the fact that he's in his 11th year with us, and I hope he can end his career with us. The breakthrough, I think, in his career came after the loss to the Titans. And you say, well, wait a minute, it coincides with Patrick Mahomes becoming QB1 in 2018. And yes, I understand that and get it. But he got hurt in the second half of that game. The Chiefs would not have lost that game had Kelce been healthy. That was the 22-21 loss to the Titans in the divisional playoff game in 2017. The Mariota pass back to himself. If Kelce doesn't get hurt, Chris Jones also gets hurt in that game. The Chiefs are going to win that game. But I think that moment was almost like Mahomes' moment with the play at the end of the first half against Cincinnati. Instead of something that beat them down, or it just made them more competitive and got them refocused. From that time on, and yes, it coincides with Mahomes, but still, Kelce's not been nearly the same guy on the field. That's when he took off and went into his own galaxy and his own rocket.
In addition to Travis Kelce, there is lots of camp competition at tight end. And what's neat about that tight end group that includes Kelce, Noah Gray, Jody Fortson, Blake Bell, and Matt Bushman, you've got some varying skill sets there, and it's going to be fascinating, I think, Mitch. How do you think that the group of tight ends, whoever it is, whether they keep 3, 4, however many they keep, how will the styles of play kind of play off of each other with regards to how the Chiefs might like to use the tight end spot this year?
Well, it's a very astute observation, but here's where this discussion takes on a whole new meaning. So let's pull the car off over on the side of the road here and really think about this. There is no fullback on this team. There is no more Sausage, no Anthony Sherman. There's no Michael Burton. So the tight end room, if you will, becomes a dual role. And that's why there will definitely be 4 tight ends on this roster. And all 4 of them, even Kelsey, at times will be asked to fill in that kind of H-back, fullback role, whether it's motioning into it or lining it up there. But there's a whole nother file folder of plays from Andy Reid where he's taking this tight end H-back and replacing the fullback and doing a whole bunch of stuff out of it. Now, I hate it that Jody Fortson's injured again. I mean, he's had a shoulder injury like one of the first days we had in pads, and hopefully he'll get back soon. But I'm going to add Kendall Blanton in there. Bushman's been good. He was really good in the preseason last year, and he's been good so far in this camp. And he's getting the bulk of the snaps that were left absentee by the injury to Jody Fortson. Noah Gray's been steady, good. He's pressing forward. Blake Bell brings a little bit of a power to the old bulldozer here, and he can fill into that fullback role very well as run routes. But Kendall Blanton is a guy that played with her. He won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He played at Mizzou. People forget about him. He's from Blue Springs. But he is part of this as well. There are 7 tight ends on the roster. Fortson's hurt. That leaves 6 up. There'll be 4 that will make it, and it'll be a tough cut. But all 4 are going to be all over the game plan, whomever that 4 is, all season long, because there is no fullback. Chiefs fans have got to be ready for it and rethink this the way the Chiefs have been rethinking it since March.
Will be fascinating to watch, and it's always fascinating to watch the Chiefs' number 87, Travis Kelce. Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, joining us for a training camp report brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azura Credit Union. Ask Haven Byrne, Crystal Rippey, or Melissa Hunter about using the Credit Union Advantage for your home loan. Mitch, who will we be discussing tomorrow?
Well, I was going to go Chris Jones. He's not here yet. But Nick Bolton has a big role on this team, bigger than you may realize. And I'm excited about the defense, but it has to have Nick Bolton as the nucleus of the atom. And so we're going to dive into the one they call Nick Bolton and why he's way more important than any Chiefs fan maybe realizes.
Looking forward to it, Mitch. Thanks so much for the time today.
Thanks, Dan.
That is Mitch Holthus, and that is, again, a training camp report brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azura Credit Union. We'll step aside for another break here on 580 Sports Talk. When we come back, the latest on what might be an eventful 24 hours, another eventful 24 hours in the world of college football and conference realignment, and a look ahead to tonight's Royals game against the Mets. That's coming up on 580 Sports Talk. 544 on 580 Sports Talk. We are coming down the home stretch on today's program. We'll have a little overtime for you. Kellis Robinette from the Wichita Eagle and Kansas City Star, K-State beat writer, joined Jake and Fulton on Mic'd Up earlier today. And we'll bring you that conversation as a prelude to Royals baseball tonight. Game 2 of the three-game set between the Royals and the Mets, 7:10 first pitch, 6:30 pregame. That's when we'll hand it off to the Royals radio network. Royals have called up left-hander Cole Reagans to make his second start with the club. Reagans and Tucker Davidson were both called up today. Davidson actually just reporting to the big league club after he was claimed and acquired in a trade for cash considerations with the Los Angeles Angels. So a pair of left-handers joined the roster. Jackson Kowar and James MacArthur were both optioned to AAA Omaha as the corresponding roster moves. Royals lineup tonight has Salvador Perez back behind the plate and hitting cleanup. Matt Duffy's going to handle first base. It goes Garcia at third, Witt Jr. at short, Melendez in left, Perez behind the plate, Massey at second, Olivares the DH, Waters in right, Duffy at first, Isbell in center. I do like watching Kyle Isbell play center field. He's a slick center fielder. Just wish he could hit a little bit more. You know, back in the 70s and 80s, you get away with a great defensive center fielder who didn't really hit. It's a little harder to get away with that in 2023 where everybody has to hit. So, and not just in the literal sense of everybody comes to bat 1 through 9. Just you have to get offensive production from all 9 spots in the order. And there just hasn't been enough offensive production from Kyle Isbell. I know that Fulton Caster loves to advance the Kyle Isbell agenda, but it's just not one that I can get behind, unfortunately. So, a lot going on still today in the world of college sports realignment. And it sure doesn't feel coincidental that one day after George Kliavkoff finally presented a media rights deal to the remaining 9 Pac-12 members, and that media rights deal was well short of financial expectations, was predominantly streaming and not linear, and was contingent on the Pac-9 holding like a bake sale, except with Apple TV subscriptions to make sure they could make their athletic revenues budgets work on a year-by-year basis. Doesn't feel like a coincidence that today the story started to leak about, well, and maybe the Big Ten is interested in adding Oregon and Washington. And maybe Stanford and Cal, too. Who knows? And maybe that's also why the Florida State University Board of Trustees meeting and very public and pointed comments about leaving the ACC were made today as well. The ball is rolling downhill, and it is rolling very fast. Jason Scheer of Wildcat Authority, the 24/7 Sports Arizona website, has been one of, if not the sharpest voices and best reporters on all of this all summer long. And he tweeted about half an hour ago, there is an expectation within the Big Ten that this is going to all move fast. There's a meeting tonight with the expansion team to assess candidates. Oregon and Washington are currently the leaders, but multiple schools will be discussed. He also tweeted an hour ago, there's a legitimate chance that the Big 12 is arranging to make a maximum impact with all the movement going on. That means the Big 12 could announce Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah at the same time. Not definite, and I think there are likely leaks before then, but possibility. All kind of feels like it's leading to the final outcome being everybody who can leave the Pac-12 leaving together. And not together as in going to the same place, but just the announcement happening at roughly the same time. Because apparently nobody wants to take the blame for, quote, blowing up the Pac-12, even though it's very easy to assign blame for the blowing up, the implosion or explosion, however you want to think about it, of the Pac-12. It's very easy to point fingers. You can point them at Los Angeles. You can point them at the Big Ten for inviting the Los Angeles schools in the first place. You don't get to point them at Colorado. You don't get to point them at Arizona or Arizona State or Utah or Oregon or Washington, whoever else might leave the league. The damage was already done. The ship had already hit the iceberg. Now it's just about finding lifeboats. And the lifeboat is there from the Big 12 for the Arizona schools and for Utah if they want it. At the moment, they decide that they want it. And with the leak out there of the Big 10 now looking at Oregon and Washington a bit more seriously, because Oregon and Washington, without them, the whole that's the boat disappearing underwater. If we can continue the kind of tortured metaphor I'm doing here, that's the end. Because the 9 schools remaining right now can look at where they stand and say, well, you know what? At least we still have Oregon and Washington, and they may want out, but at least we still have them on our side for now. Maybe we can come up with a short-term media deal that satiates everybody. Then we can do some expansion. We can add SMU, San Diego State, whoever else. Keep everybody together for now and try and maintain our position in the Autonomy 5 and in the Power 5. But if Oregon and Washington want out and they leave and they start having these real substantive conversations with the Big 10, yeah, you don't want to be last on the boat before it sinks. So, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if things slow down and get a little quiet in the next 24 to 48 hours. It wouldn't surprise me if I'm coming on the air on Friday to tell you that the Big 12 has 3 new members. Like at this point, given what's transpired in the last week, because remember, it was a week ago today we were talking about, oh, wow, it looks like Colorado might leave. That was a week ago today. We weren't talking about Arizona. We weren't talking about Big 10 expansion. They seemed happy at 16. We weren't talking about any of this stuff. It was just, oh, wow, Colorado might leave. That was a week ago. What's the old saying? That there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. It kind of feels like, as far as the history of college sports goes, we're in one of those weeks where decades are happening. And where does it end? Where does it end if the Big 10 really does go to 20 teams? Or even if they go to 18? 18 is so unwieldy. 16 feels like the maximum you can do to have it still feel like a conference in the way that conferences have always felt like conferences. When you get to 18 or 20, what does that even look like? What does that even feel like? I promise that we'll talk about that more on tomorrow's edition of the program. But for right now, we're going to take one final break here on this edition of 580 Sports Talk. We'll come back with a final word here on 580 WIBW.
FM 104.9.
One more thing. In conclusion, you better wrap it up.
Wrapping up, walking off this edition of 580 Sports Talk with the final word, and walking off is appropriate because that's what the Royals did last night on a balk. Let's take one more opportunity just for a little bit to laugh at the New York Mets for finding a way to further humiliate themselves in what has already been one of the most humiliating seasons in the history of baseball by losing a game on a walk-off balk by a guy who had yet to throw a pitch upon coming into the game. Extremely funny stuff. But as far as the Royals go, it's a kind of a new chapter for the Royals from this point forward, with the trade deadline passed and with players like Scott Barlow and Ryan Yarbrough and Aroldis Chapman having found new homes. The Royals now forge forward these final 2 months, and it's going to be very hard for them to avoid the ignominy of being the worst team in Royals history. They got to win 24 more games to avoid that distinction, and I don't know that they got that in them in these final 2 months. But if they can play with some youthful energy, if Bobby Witt Jr. and MJ Melendez, who's hit better since the All-Star break, can drive the bus, if their defense can improve in the outfield with Kyle Isbell and Drew Waters playing more often, if some of the young pitchers show some life down the stretch, maybe there's something that can be salvaged from this season after all. Again, not in the standings, but in terms of hopefully laying a foundation for 2024. That's my final word today. That's going to do it for 580 Sports Talk. We got some overtime coming your way next before Royals baseball at 6:30. For Kyle Manthey, I'm Dan Lucero. This has been 580 Sports Talk.